There were whispers in Hollywood that never made it to the tabloids. Rumors passed in hushed tones between studio lots and backroom bars, stories too dangerous to be told aloud. At the center of these whispers stood a woman with flame-red hair and an iron will. Maureen O'Hara. She wasn't just a movie star. She was a survivor in a system designed to break spirits behind the glitz. Long after the lights dimmed on the so-called golden age of Hollywood, O'Hara did something nearly unthinkable for her era. She named names. And in doing so, she cracked open a world carefully veiled in charm, secrecy, and silence. This is the hidden truth she carried for decades, the names she revealed, the prices she paid, and the quiet war she fought behind her dazzling screen presence. Before she was a legend, O'Hara was a young Irish girl with dreams bigger than most dared to dream. Hollywood saw her as a striking beauty, with elegance and a commanding presence that demanded attention. But behind that image, the journey was filled with calculated manipulation, betrayal masked as opportunity, and powerful men who thought they could own her. They didn't expect a woman who would fight back. John Ford was the first name on her list. Not because he was the worst, but because he was the most complicated. Ford was the director who shaped her career, the man behind her iconic performances in How Green Was My Valley, The Quiet Man, and Rio Grande. To the world, they were a dynamic creative pair. But in reality, the relationship was laced with intensity, manipulation, and emotional bruises. Ford could praise her brilliance one day and tear her down the next in front of an entire crew. He belittled her with biting sarcasm, barked at her during rehearsals, and reduced her to tears with harsh words that weren't about performance. They were about power. Rumors followed them like shadows. Some claimed he loved her but couldn't handle rejection. Others whispered that he saw in her a reflection of his own longing and weakness. When he proposed, drunk, desperate, and angry, she said no. And from that day, their partnership was never the same. She owed much of her career to him, but the cost was paid in emotional tolls no camera could capture. She stayed near him, not out of affection, but because in Hollywood, loyalty was sometimes the only way to survive. Louis B. Mayer, head of MGM and self-anointed kingmaker of classic cinema, was a different beast altogether. Mayer operated like a god in Hollywood, deciding who became a star and who faded into oblivion. When he offered O'Hara a contract, it came wrapped in promises. Luxury, fame, the illusion of artistic control. But she saw through it. She said no. That one word, no, was enough to ignite his quiet wrath. Roles disappeared. Friends in the industry stopped calling. Meetings were cancelled with no explanation. A silent blacklisting began, and the phrase "no one says no to Mayer" became less of a warning and more of a prophecy. O'Hara watched as her career momentum stalled, not because she lacked talent or presence, but because she dared to protect her autonomy. Under Mayer's rule, actresses were expected to mold themselves to the studio's desires, even if that meant sacrificing their dignity. O'Hara refused. And for that, she paid a high price. Howard Hughes, with his fortune and charm, presented a more seductive danger. To outsiders, he was an eccentric billionaire. To women in the industry, he was a predator cloaked in sophistication. He chased O'Hara with gifts, attention, and obsessive energy. But when his advances were rejected, his demeanor shifted. Fast. Suddenly, projects she'd been promised vanished. Producers pulled out without reason. Rumors spread. False, malicious, and meant to isolate. Hughes was known for using his vast influence to destroy reputations when his pride was bruised. For O'Hara, resisting him wasn't just a personal stand. It was a career-threatening move. She endured veiled threats, strange phone calls, and industry whispers. It was a quiet war fought in shadows. Hughes never laid a hand on her, but he didn't have to. His reach extended into every office, every headline. And in a world where connections meant survival, his silent campaign could freeze someone out completely. Then came Jack L. Warner, the cold strategist behind Warner Brothers. O'Hara's early years under his contract were marked by disillusionment. She had thought she'd signed up for a launch pad. What she got was a leash. Warner used her like a pawn, plugging her into roles she didn't choose, reshaping her image for the studio's benefit, and ignoring her protests entirely. When she objected, he threatened blacklisting. Not just at Warner Brothers, but everywhere. One studio's rejection could poison an entire industry. Realizing she was being traded like property, O'Hara made a bold move. She went public. She called out the coercion, naming Warner and his tactics to the press. It was a reckless act, one that could have ended her. And in many ways, it did cost her. Roles dried up. Her name carried baggage. But it also made her something few dared to be. An actress who fought back in full view. But the most chilling figure on her list was the one she never fully named. A powerful tycoon with near-invisible hands and absolute influence. He wasn't a director, a producer, or a studio head. He was something more elusive. He controlled information. Controlled the press. Controlled perception. He invited her to a private meeting, promising a role that could revive her career. The price was her silence, and her submission. She refused. And from that moment, the machine moved against her. Tabloids began to smear her. Anonymous sources painted her as difficult, erratic, even unstable. Lies appeared in gossip columns, painting a version of her the public didn't recognize. Industry allies distanced themselves. She became a cautionary tale whispered about, a reminder of what happens when you cross the wrong people. And then the worst blow, a faked photograph circulated in the press, showing her in what appeared to be a breakdown on set. It was doctored. But truth came too late. The image stuck, and reputations are hard to reclaim once they've been stolen. Maureen O'Hara didn't vanish quietly. She stood before the press and delivered a statement that echoed far beyond the cameras. "I will not trade my honor for the role. If I have to leave, I will leave with my head held high." In just a few words, she shattered the silence that had protected so many powerful men. Her defiance was not just personal. It was historic. She exposed a culture that punished strength and rewarded obedience. And while her career never fully recovered to its former glory, her legacy transformed into something deeper than stardom. She became a symbol for every woman who had been told to sit down, to smile, to give in. The names she revealed, John Ford, Louis B. Mayer, Howard Hughes, Jack L. Warner, and the one she didn't, paint a disturbing but essential portrait of how power worked in classic Hollywood. Each man had his own method. Ford weaponized emotional control. Mayer ruled with silent threats. Hughes punished rejection. Warner treated contracts like chains. And the unnamed tycoon turned the press into a weapon. Together, they formed an invisible wall around the industry. A system that decided who succeeded and who disappeared. O'Hara's refusal to bow to that system came with scars. But it also planted seeds. Seeds of truth, of change, and of resistance. Her story isn't just about surviving. It's about standing tall when the world tries to crush you. It's about choosing integrity when compromise seems easier. And it's about calling out the darkness even when no one else is brave enough to do it. O'Hara didn't play by the rules. She challenged them. And in doing so, she made it possible for future generations of actors, especially women, to demand more, to speak louder, and to believe they deserved better. In remembering Maureen O'Hara, we don't just remember the films, the accolades, or the applause. We remember the strength behind the smile. The silence she broke. The power she dared to confront. And the legacy she left, not as a victim of Hollywood, but as a quiet warrior who refused to disappear. Her courage opened the door for others to speak, and her story reminds us that sometimes, the most powerful roles we play are the ones off camera, where truth must be louder than fear. If you found this story moving, make sure to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real stories behind the stars you thought you knew. There's always more hidden beneath the surface, and we're here to tell it.